Amazing. Hey, well, really good to see everyone and good to be speaking with you all tonight. As Andy said, my name is Alec and I'm on the team here at St. Mary's and I serve with the youth and with the students. And tonight we're continuing our series on real encounters. You can see that beautifully designed slide behind me. And we're talking about and we're looking at stories of Jesus meeting with real people, just like you and me, and making real tangible change in their life. And tonight we're going to explore a story, as you've heard, all about healing. And now I think we've all either needed healing or are currently in need of healing in our lives. And thank you for all of those who bravely came up and spoke and shared a testimony of healing in their life. I think it's really not about the question of whether we need healing, but I think oftentimes it's the question of who or what do we turn to for healing. And healing might be physical for you, as it was in many of those testimonies, as it is going to be for the man in our passage tonight. It might be emotional, like it was for me. But again, I don't think the question is whether or not we need healing, but really, where or who do we turn to for that healing? And so just a bit of background on me personally, just so you can get to know me a little bit better before we get started. As you might tell from my accent, I'm originally from the U.S., What you may not tell, as obviously, is that I come from Mexican and Italian backgrounds, and that's just my way, essentially, of trying to tell you that I have a very giant family that's very tightly knit and can be very fiery. I'd like to think I'm like the perfect combo of like spicy white Italian and like actual spicy Mexican. And my family is really the opposite of like classic Britishness. They're loud, they're direct, they're in your face, they're touchy-feely, and they're the first on the dance floor at any family gathering. And that is something I've certainly inherited, and the students can attest to that. You can talk to them after more about that later. And I think there's all parts of those things that I've inherited, and there's all, whether we like it or not, parts of our families that we inherit. Everything from traditions to genetics to even family baggage. We all take parts of what we were raised with, who we were raised by, and take that with us. And there's many parts of my family that I'm very proud to inherit. For example, that gift of rhythm in my Latin hips. And unfortunately, there's things I'd rather like to avoid. For example, it's a bit of an unspoken family tradition that many marriages in the family end in divorce. And that is, unfortunately, just a bit of a tradition that we have in the family. In my parents' case, that was a particularly messy divorce when I was 7 years old, and that left our family broken, and that left with my relationship with my dad broken as well, even to this day, 20 years later. And unfortunately, this was no surprise to anyone because the same exact thing happened to my dad. His family went through a messy divorce, and likewise, his relationship with his dad was highly impacted as well. And so, for me, it was something that I was almost expecting to happen. It was something that happened to my dad, happened with his dad, again, as a family tradition that we passed down. And similarly, unfortunately, like many divorced men in my family, my dad had a very difficult time recovering from the divorce. He went through many more failed relationships while I was growing up. It was a constant back and forth between odd jobs and unemployment, and also a constant back and forth of in temporary accommodation and then moving back in with his mom. And when I was growing up, quite honestly, I was really ashamed to be associated with him, if I'm being completely honest with you. And truthfully, it's because I had this huge fear that I was just destined to become exactly like him. Now, as any good angsty kid with some childhood trauma might do, I listened to a lot of punk music growing up to work through some of that pain. And there was this one song from this group called The Offspring. You might know The Offspring. And there was a song with some lyrics that really did stick with me as a kid. I warn you, they're a bit dark. I'm just going to go for it, and we'll see what you think. Goes like this. Nothing changes because it's all the same. Good start. The world you get's the one you give away. It all just happens again way down the line. All the things you learn when you're a kid, you'll screw up just like your parents did. It all happens again way down the line. Very encouraging message for all of us on a Sunday. That's my talk. I hope you all had a great time. But what did you expect from punk music? Anyway, I could never shake that chorus from my head. It was something that really plagued me as a kid, something that constantly followed me all through my childhood. And again, I had this real fear that I was just destined to be a bad father and a bad husband, just like my dad and like his dad before him. And I thought it was fate. I thought that's what I got for being born into this family. Great, I might be able to dance a little bit and eat a little bit of spicy food, but I didn't think that was worth it for the trade-off. And so my life goal, my key driver all through childhood and my young adult years was to find healing. Healing not just from the impact the divorce left on me as a kid, but healing from this destiny that I thought I was bound to just by nature. I don't know your story, but I'm sure we've all dealt with brokenness in some way in our lives. And I think we're all in need of healing in one way, shape, or form. For me, it's emotional. Maybe it is for you too. Maybe it's physical. Maybe it's spiritual. Maybe it's healing from a past relationship or healing from a bad experience with church. Maybe it's healing from an illness you're struggling with, a chronic condition that keeps plaguing you. I guess my question tonight is, what's the weight that you've been carrying with you? What's been plaguing you that you need healing from? Is there something maybe you're running away from? And more importantly, and the question I want to explore tonight, what is it that you might be running to? I think the real question, once again, is not whether we need healing, but instead, who or what do we turn to for that healing? And tonight, I think our passage points us to the answer. Our passage tonight comes from John 5, and I'm going to read it to us starting from verse 1, and you can follow above in the screen just above me. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed. One was there who had been invalid there for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" So the invalid replied, "I had no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." And I'd just like to pause at that point in the story for a moment. You may know the story, but if you just wait with me here, just so we can sit in this moment for a second. Here we see a man who is desperate for healing. It's likely he's been disabled for most of his life and has possibly been waiting by this pool for years. And again, I think the focus tonight is, where is this man looking for healing? What has he been putting his faith in order to be healed? There's some older manuscripts of this passage that have a verse that says that the people at this pool would wait for the moving of the waters. From time to time, an angel of the Lord would come down and stir up the waters. And the first one into the pool, after each disturbance, would be cured of whatever disease they had. Now, no one else in the Bible do we read about God initiating this in any way. And so the best I think we can assume this is a bit of a folktale or a superstition that these people were holding on to at the time and desperately hoping to be true. And quite honestly, who wouldn't want to hold on to that? And when Jesus asked this man if he wants to be made well, he's so entrenched in this superstition. He's so entrenched in this reality that he can't think of healing in any other way except for by this magic pool. And if I'm being honest, I think this is something we all might struggle with. At least I'll be the first to admit it. As a kid, again, I was so afraid of these lyrics from The Offspring that I turned to anything that I thought could rescue me from all of it just happening again way down the line. For me, that looked like being the complete opposite of everything that I saw in my dad. And so I'd focus, since he was divorced, I would be focusing on having a long-term stable relationship. If he struggled with unemployment, I was going to chase after the most successful and stable career I could find. If he was a bad father, then I was going to do everything I could to be the best version of myself so that when I had kids, I would be better. And now don't get me wrong, none of these things are inherently bad, but the issue is that I was putting my faith completely in these things being my healing. I thought those were the only ways that I would be able to heal my brokenness and escape from my fears. And so in short, I was fleeing one superstition, the song from The Offspring, and putting my faith completely in some other folktale, some other reality that I thought was going to be my healing. And for me, that was a bit of like a version of the American dream. I was going to be the self-made man, the successful, pull yourself up from your bootstraps type of guy. I was going to have the perfect life, and I was going to work hard to get it. And so what did I do? Well, step one, get a girlfriend. And so I found someone, we dated for 2 years, talked about marriage way too soon and way too young, I might add. And I prepared to try to be the best future husband I possibly could be. But that didn't work out. We fell out of love. The relationship ended and we broke up. So what next? Well, let me try career. So I went off to find the most successful career I can think of, and I was encouraged to do engineering. And so I did that because I heard that it was going to pay a lot. And so I went to uni, got the degree. But quite honestly, I don't know that I really enjoyed it. And upon graduating, couldn't find a job. So what next? Well, let's try religion. Not really because I cared about my faith, but because I thought it would make me a better person and make me good enough to be maybe a good dad. So I went to church, I prayed the prayers, I went through the motions, but I really hated it. And none of it felt like it was healing for me. In fact, I felt just as broken as before. And that's when the fear really set in. What was wrong with me? All these things seemed to be good and seemed to be working for other people, so why aren't they working for me? It was like I was sitting by this poolside, like the guy in our passage, but I could never get down into the water fast enough to be the first one there. Or so it seemed to me. I looked for healing in all these different places, but ended right back at the fear I had that I was just destined to be a failure. For the man in our passage, the healing he needed was physical, and he looked for it in a so-called magic pool. For me, my healing was emotional, and for me, it was the pool of the dream of a perfect life. So what's your story? What's your pool? What might you be holding on to for healing? Is it religion or astrology or manifesting? Is it a career, your studies at uni, a relationship? Is it still new year, new you if you've managed to hold on that long? Is it a new skincare routine? Is it whatever your favorite TikToker has told you? Because they seem to be having a very good life, and so maybe I will try being vegan and walking around barefoot. Now, I'm not trying to pass judgment at all on any of us, most importantly because I've definitely been there myself, particularly with the vegan thing. We can talk about that another time. All I'm trying to do is just ask a provocative question that might help us to stop and think. And it's that provocative question that really starts to change our story today and change the story for the man in this passage. In verse 6 of the passage, Jesus finally shows up onto the scene, and the verse says, when Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" Now, I think that's a very provocative question. I mean, Jesus, do you want to get well? That's quite a cheeky thing to say. But this man's response, I think, shows us why Jesus is asking this question in the first place. Verse 7 says this, "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me get into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, somebody else goes down ahead of me." And so this man isn't really answering Jesus' question in the first place. In fact, I think he's really preoccupied with trying to make sense of why he isn't healed yet. And quite honestly, I think that's a question that I get confused with a lot, and we can often get caught up with as well. But I think the good news I notice in this space is that that doesn't matter to Jesus. He's not asking him about his past. He's not asking him what he has done or hasn't done, what he's tried, hasn't tried. He's not asking whether the guy feels like he deserves to be healed. All he's simply asking is, do you want to get well? Clearly, I think the unspoken answer is yes, because in verse 8 it says, Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." And at once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. In a moment, Jesus completely heals this man. And he doesn't do it by helping him into the pool. He doesn't take him to a doctor. He doesn't WebMD it. He simply speaks healing over him and completely changes his life. You can imagine this man's reintegrated into society now. We later find him at the temple, and so he's been reintegrated into his faith community, and he was likely reunited with old friends and family. All these things that he maybe could have only dreamed of before have now suddenly become a reality. And so to me, when I read this isn't simply healing, but it's truly like this guy is alive again, like he's been reborn. It's like he's a whole new creation. And I think that word creation matters because if you keep reading, this passage seems to oddly move into this section about Jewish laws around the Sabbath. And quite honestly, it can seem a bit tangential to everything going on. But why don't we read from verse 9? It says, "The day on which this took place was a Sabbath. And so the Jewish leaders said to the man who has been healed, 'It is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat.' But he replied, 'The man who made me well said to me, pick up your mat and walk.' So they asked him, 'Who is this fellow who told you to pick it up and walk?'" Now again, this can feel like it's all very tangential to the story, but I do think this is actually a significant part of our understanding of what it means when Jesus heals. You might know that the Sabbath is originally introduced in the very first book of the Bible, Genesis, and it's when God creates the world. And so you might know the Sunday school story. In 6 days, God makes all the plants and animals and these weird little creatures, human beings. And how does he do all of this? Well, he speaks it into existence. just as Jesus speaks healing over this man. God speaks and things are created. Jesus speaks and this man is recreated. And then on the seventh day, there's the Sabbath. God rests and rejoices over all that he's created. It's good, it's complete, it's whole. And so the Sabbath becomes this important reminder for us as God's creation to rest and enjoy in all of the goodness that he's created. And it's also a reminder to rest in the fact that he not only created us, but is smiling and delighting over each of us. And so in our passage, when Jesus says those words, "Get up," this man becomes a whole new creation. And when Jesus says walk, he's walking into a whole new life, a life of new wholeness. And so with Jesus, healing is not just about mending our brokenness. It is that, but it's also giving us a new wholeness grounded in the fact that we are deeply loved by God and that he delights in us. In a similar way, when I finally met with Jesus for myself, it was quite honestly like becoming a whole new person. But he didn't carry me to some magic pool where my perfect life or career or wife was waiting. He didn't give me all those things that I thought I needed to feel whole. Instead, he simply spoke to me and said, "Alec, get up. Walk with me. You are who I say you are. Let me tell you who that is." And so I think healing really did begin for me on that day. And the best way I can describe my healing journey has been a long walk with Jesus where I ask him, "Who do you say that I am?" And he tells me. I ask him, "Who do you say that I am?" And he'll say, "You are not your dad. You are who I say that you are." I'll ask him, "Who do you say that I am?" And he'll say, "You are not a failure. You are who I say that you are." I'll ask him, "Who do you say that I am?" And he'll say, "You are loved. You are wonderfully made. You are who I say that you are." And so I ask him who I am. And with every word he says back, it's like he's healing those old wounds. He's speaking new life over me. And he's recreating me, just as he recreated that man. I am becoming, and I'm in the process of becoming, a whole new person. I am becoming a new whole person. And with every step we take together on that journey, I'm healing. With every word he speaks over me, I am being made whole. And I think it's important that we today see that healing journey as a walk and as a conversation. Because truly, I do think it is an ongoing journey. I think it's easy for me to ask questions of like, why didn't Jesus meet with me earlier? Why hasn't this healing been instantaneous for me like it was for the man in this passage? I can get caught up in questions, and those questions aren't bad, but there's times when I stop speaking with Jesus. I walk away. I forget to ask him who he says that I am. And all those old fears can start to bubble back up. But I think the good news is that when this happens, and for me it inevitably does happen, and it might happen for you, the good news is that I no longer need to chase after healing because healing is constantly chasing after me. Jesus comes back to me and says, "Get up and walk with me." And I'm reminded again that my healing is ultimately found in him. And so tonight, I think Jesus is inviting each of us on this journey with him, whether for the first time or again for maybe the 100th time. And I don't know what brought you here. I don't know what you might be searching for or where you've been searching for it. But whether you've been looking for him or not, I can say with 100% certainty that Jesus is here and waiting for you right now. And I want to encourage you that Jesus can give us so much more than we could ask or think or imagine, because what he does is gives us the gift of himself. In a moment, we're going to have a time for prayer ministry, which quite honestly is just practically getting to experience this reality for ourselves. And it's a chance for us to practically meet with Jesus, which we do in this church by inviting the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of Jesus, to come and be with us and come into our lives. And before we do that, I just want to say one final thing. And it's that going on this healing journey, I think, does require in part an action from us. We're not the ones doing the healing, but I do think we need to answer for ourselves Jesus' question, do you want to be made well? And I think we also need to respond to Jesus' invitation, get up and walk. Jesus is willing and able to heal us and make us whole from anything we might be suffering from, emotional, physical, spiritual, mental. But I think the only way we will ever know this for ourselves and know this truly is to get up, walk, and follow him. And so can I leave us by just hearing those words of Jesus again and making them our own for tonight? Do you want to get well? Get up, walk. Come to Jesus and step into the new life that he is inviting each of us into tonight. I'm going to invite the worship team up to lead us in one more song. Can I encourage you during this time? Can we just take a moment to think about maybe what it is that we're looking for healing in tonight? And just start that conversation with Jesus as we listen to this song. And then I'll come back up in a moment and we'll have a time to respond.